Hey, wow, 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 wow. I'm so happy to be here and talk about probably one of the most important things that I've ever done and reflecting on, 10 years of this. I'm I'm happy to have made it this far. So 10 years ago, 2014, July 7th, uh, we hosted a Twitter town hall using the hashtag UOKSIS to have a conversation about street harassment as experienced primarily by Black and Latino women. And it started because I had shared a story about a woman who was being street harassed in Harlem and how I intervened and focused more on her by asking her the question, "You okay, sis?" And when I shared that story, there was a conversation about, can we just commit to doing this summer, and going forward when we see street harassment happening, can we intervene, not trying to be savior or get into fights or anything, but rather to just, speak to the person experiencing it and make sure that they're okay and come up with ways that we can just intervene without causing any more problems. And it was a really great conversation, and people were like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like, we need a hashtag, and a couple of people came up with hashtags and settled on "You okay, sis?" And from there, we were like, all right, let's do something about this. And I got a check-in from a brother named Terrell Starr, and he was a reporter for News One at the time. I believe it was News One. And he said he wanted to do an article on this. He wanted to do a project on this. He wanted to like make a video about this. And I was like, all right, cool. And so he wrote this article, made this video, and I have to be honest, I don't necessarily look back on that part the most favorably. And he and I talked about it, and he totally understood where I was coming from after the fact. And I think he was like earlier in his career and still figuring things out. But I felt like that article and that video, that like mini documentary, led to the harassment, online harassment of so many Black women, myself included. Right. So while he was, had a good heart and was trying to raise awareness about something, he inadvertently invited, more harassment to I guess, our digital doors. So we hosted a town hall 10 years ago today. Um, and it was just, oh, I was so overwhelmed in positive and negative ways. I was overwhelmed that so many people were coming forward and sharing their stories about, street harassment and what they'd experienced. And it was a guided conversation because we were asking people questions and they were following along. And that's one thing I appreciated about Twitter was that we could use it in that way to facilitate these kinds of conversations in this town hall style. And so many people were participating. And then I was like overwhelmed in like a negative way because it was just like, oh my goodness, just yes, I understood that street harassment was a big thing. Yes, I understood that, many of us started experiencing it between ages 10 and 12. But I was just really overwhelmed by how many people were sharing their stories. And it became a lot to deal with. But it was great and it was absolutely necessary. It was a conversation that needed to be had. Fortunately, um, we were subjected to online harassment by a lot of trolls and, pretty orchestrated effort, primarily by Black men to basically silence us. And, they got this idea that we were, working with the police to put more Black men in jail, and we were working with white women, and it started a huge like backlash against Black feminists that had been percolating for a couple of years already, but it really kind of had um, that it charged people up to identify Black feminists as like the enemy of Black people. Not like that's not the first time that that's happened, but it led to tremendous, tremendous, tremendous harassment. And I kind of like I tried to, I think I stayed strong through a lot of it. But there were some moments where I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. And that was the point, right? That was the point, was to antagonize and harass us so much that we would back away from what we were doing. But instead of getting silent about it, the conversation grew. And people began using the hashtag to, share when they've had, as they were in the moment and just asking for support and, or they would come and tell a story of something that just happened to them at the store or while they were walking down the street. And other people would come in and they would chime in and it's like, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm here for you. Other people were sharing their ideas about intervention and tactics that you could use to center somebody who's experiencing it. There was a lot of work to do around that. And I was able to, kind of take it and build it out and really start outlining, here's some bystander intervention practices that you can use that center the victims and don't create, a more antagonistic scene or possibly a violent scene because we understood that, mostly men who would be rejected by women could turn violent. And that was definitely an experience that was shared by people. Um, the movement grew. It was like a conversation, but I want to call it a movement. And women overseas, in other countries and countries in the Caribbean, countries on the continent of Africa, countries, people in Europe had sisters in Paris and the UK and, sisters in South Africa and Nigeria, we're all having these conversations and talking about the impact of this. And people were interviewing me and, all these different publications were covering it. And I appreciated that because all we wanted to do was amplify, this particular action and this particular movement and to offer people support. And then I started seeing people, using it to develop their own educational plans. And I was all for it. But I didn't like the erasure. And the reason why I didn't like the erasure is because we're talking primarily about the experiences of Black and Latino women. And whenever other people take some work and kind of use it for their purposes, especially when they're not crediting the people, it's a form of erasure. And I was particular about Black women and Latino women being centered because anti-street harassment work has been around for many, many years, but it would always like primarily center white women. And so it bothered me when I would see white women use, you okay, sis. It's like, y'all don't call each other sisters. So what are you doing? Right? So, I had to think about things like that. Um, but over the years, it was growing and the conversation began to expand, and people were talking about domestic violence. People were talking about intimate partner violence and, they would talk about missing Black and Latino women. They would talk about, just sharing support when dealing with, gender-based violence. And I thought that that was really important. And I loved watching it grow. And people would call me in to do, facilitate trainings and talk about, different tactics. I got to write the foreword on this great book about, Me Too and bystander intervention. And, it reached the people it was supposed to reach. It reached a lot of people. Despite all of the negativity we dealt with at various times, but mostly in the beginning, this proved to be, a way to build community, not just online, but like offline as well. I remember visiting other countries, and there were women there that were hosting me for lunches and for dinner because of the work that had done and how it had helped them. And being able to talk to them about movement and about organizing and activism. It was really amazing. And so, here we are 10 years later, and I'm just like reflecting on it. I'm reflecting on the impact, I mean, global impact, right? I'm thinking about the way it changed conversations about bystander intervention. I'm thinking about how people began to take on and adopt new practices for how they could help people when they saw them on the street. I smile now. I see people, recounting stories and talking about, how they went and pretended to be someone's friend or, that kind of thing. And I love that. I love that people are, doing this and I'd like to think I had a little something to do with it. I want to thank, everybody who was involved, especially earlier in getting, the hashtag would trend, and draw attention and things like that. I want to thank the Truths, Trudy. I want to thank I want to thank Terrell. I want to thank, all the other folks who contributed to those early conversations and kept spreading the word. And whenever a new article would come out, you spread it. I want to thank The Atlantic for being one of the first publications to cover this. And I think, Essence, Griot, The Root, all that stuff, they all covered these things. In fact, I won in 2014, I won I was named one of the Root 100 for my activism that year. So, I was honored for that. It's not like we do that for the accolades, but it is nice to have your work recognized. So, that's just my reflection on UO Cases at its 10th anniversary. Shout out to everybody who continues, again, 10 years later, shout out to everybody who continues this fight. The fight isn't over. We have so much more work to do to make this world a better place. And let's just stay committed to it. Here I am 10 years later, still doing it. So thank you all, and I'll talk soon.